increasingly the techno-haves are very, very distinct from the techno-have-nots, where some people are on $1 a day with no access to drinking water, and there's other people with Game Boy thumbs and Prozac and Botox and so on. And it struck me that this world, leaving aside humanitarian issues, was economically and ecologically not viable. You can't have a divide like that. What scientists do, although sadly they don't do it enough because of the funding situation and because of the teaching demands, is to think innovatively. That's their whole point. You're having an idea, someone wants to define science as to see what everyone else can see and think what no one else has thought. You know? So it struck me that wouldn't it be wonderful if one could take the issues in the developing world, many of which are very serious in terms of energy, in terms of sanitation, in terms of healthcare, in terms of literacy, and somehow use and harness the scientists to think innovatively about those problems. It was one idea to eliminate malaria, for example, was to have genetically engineered mosquitoes who couldn't carry malaria, who would compete with the normal mosquitoes and be stronger, and rather like the grey squirrel displace the red squirrel, So that's a wonderful lateral thinking way of getting rid of malaria. Another was to develop genetically modified cress that turned a certain color when it was in contact with metal deposits, so you could plant that in a minefield and see, because it would turn red, where the mines were, just by cress growing very fast. Another is to use algae, deprive it of sulfur, and then it emits hydrogen, which is very interesting as well. It could be very good for the fuel economy, for fuel cells. So these are just some examples that are already out there of how one can think very innovatively about very, very serious and applied problems. Yeah? So the idea is to get these scientists to try and think in that way and to harness their imagination for innovative technologies in the developing world. And originally we called it the Science Corps because it was a mixture between the Peace Corps and Médecins Sans Frontières, but we're now evolving and thinking that we might have much more impact and leverage, not so much to send one or two tired empty nesters out into the developing world, but rather to do this virtually so that people can do it without any compromising of their lifestyle, and at the same time we could have a much wider constituency. So we're renaming Science for Humanity, which I personally have reservations about, but my colleagues think is wonderful. So we're Science for Humanity. And we should be up and running. We now have a CEO. We've been funded by 2 different sources. So we've got enough money to run now for the next 2 or 3 years. And suddenly, the whole thing is happening. And I think it's very exciting.